Mind the Fragments of Silicon.
Welcome to another installment of Fragments of Silicon. I am your host, Adam. Joining me is the regular crew. Let us get to the news. Let me see. Twilight, why don't you start us off this week?
All right. Well, as per usual, not really much going on around here. Just trying to stay vigilant in both out in public and at work, and work's been going pretty well. And it's been warm and cold throughout the past week, and overall things are going fairly well. Um, and in terms of gaming, I've been playing the game for this week for review, and I mean slowly and surely making some progress to Fire Emblem Three Houses, and that's about it.
All right. Petty.
Well, you all might have known I was absent last week because I was in the ER with pretty bad abdominal pain. Luckily, it was not my appendix, but some kind of bacterial infection possibly in my intestines. Gave me some antibiotics, so I'm done with those now, and it doesn't hurt anywhere near as bad, so that's good.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And let's see. Other than that, life's been mostly normal. I guess the only real thing of interest is a family friend needs some computer work done, and I got $100 out of it, so yay, money. And yeah, I think that's it from me.
All right. Well, Galax, it's your go.
I've just been exhausted all week, so I took today off to just recollect myself a little, and that's kind of worked, so that's good.
Do you have to go back to work tomorrow?
Yeah, I probably could take another day off if I had to, but I'm not planning on it.
Okay. More related to what you were talking about last week?
Just a few things. I haven't been sleeping great. The darkness it's getting dark earlier, so that never super helps. Anyway, I'm looking forward to the second part of the Pokemon Sword and Shield expansion coming out. At like midnight tomorrow night, I think.
Something like that.
Thereabouts. That's when the maintenance for Pokemon Home is supposed to end. So, there have been some leaks that I've seen some of, but I'm not going super in depth with it. I'm not like afraid of spoilers, but I prefer to see stuff when it's like fully confirmed. But it looks interesting, and I was thinking about making a joke about that for the top of the show thing, but I decided not to.
Right.
Because apparently you're going to get to choose between a black horse and a white horse, and I was going to make some kind of Book of Revelation joke, but it would have been way too wordy. Other than that, I've almost played, or I've almost beaten a Cadence of Hyrule that I got a little while ago. It's at least one playthrough, but almost actually completed it, so that's nice. I haven't made much progress in Breath of the Wild because of that, and also because I'm getting near the end of the game, and I always do that. I get near the end of the game and then don't want to actually finish. Plus, the master trials are hard. So yeah, other than that, not anything super interesting going on.
All right. I guess it's my go. Well,
Mhm.
I'm like, things have actually been fairly busy around here, mainly because I'm doing a lot of cleaning because, as mentioned last week, got company coming in for the weekend. Like, got some cousin coming in, and God, Sunday is going to be really busy because I got my brother and his family rolling in. Like, granted, it's a bit weird because even though the cousins are here for the funeral, the immediate family aren't going because let's just say it's kind of a family dispute going on that goes back a long way. It's one of those things. Plus, admittedly, I did not know the person who died like well at all, so that's another factor. And also, in the midst of this, my phone has decided to pick this time to start dying. I mean, it's not dead yet, but the sleep button, I guess, is not working properly. And I
Fine.
can still get, yeah, I can still get the phone out of sleep mode if I plug it into a charger or plug it out. But outside of that, like maybe if I squeeze it real hard for about 10 seconds, it'll come on. Like, and opposite with the turning off part. Point is, I need a new phone. I have gotten one. It came in today, so I'm gonna have to deal with that tomorrow. Hopefully, before the company comes in.
The good old standby, the phone transfer.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's actually been fairly busy and exhausting over here. Like, and will be for the next until next week, really. Like, on that note, the Sunday reviews are going to happen this Monday because once again, Sunday is like the big day when all of the family are going to be here, and I have no idea when they're rolling out. So, yeah. Right. So I think that about does it for my news. So merrily we shall roll along to the interview portion of the broadcast. And joining us this week is Blake Dove of the Quantum Astrophysicists Guild.
Hey guys, what's up?
This and that. How are you doing today?
I'm good. I sent like 250 emails today, so my fingers are sore, but that's about it.
Uh-huh. Like, right. So, you are standing in for Chris, who was supposed to be here this week, but had to drop out for unspecified reasons.
Yeah, a monkey broke into his house, shat all over his keyboard, and destroyed his computer.
I'd believe
That
it.
does sound quite dire.
Uh-huh. It's horrible. It's awful.
Right. So, be that as it may, you are a new voice to the broadcast, so we'll give you the standard run through. That is to say, we'd like to get acquainted with your background. And we start by doing asking this question: what got you interested in video games, both on a personal and a professional level?
What got me interested in video games? I think I was like 9 and the PlayStation 1 had just come out and I really wanted to play everything. So I convinced my dad that we really needed one for unspecified reasons. And then as for what got me into gaming professionally, I've been in the community and in the space for probably 15 years. Probably around my teenage years was when I first started doing anything remotely professional with video games. I did some focus testing work with Gearbox up in Dallas, around the Plano area while I was in high school. From there, I did events, still do events, been doing it for probably about 10, 11 years now. And yeah, no, I've always wanted to talk about games. I've run several different podcasts and websites and YouTube channels and streams. Pretty much everything that I've ever done has revolved around video games.
we can certainly relate. Right. Anyway, so how did you end up at the Quantum Astrophysicists Guild?
Well, it's funny that I'm sitting in for Chris because I've known Chris for about the last 8 years. When Chris was first starting out going to events and doing stuff, I was one of the first people he met. And in that time, I've worked with Chris at QAG. I've worked with him at Tiny Build. We've always been sort of, hanging around, hanging out with each other. And I've been doing most of what I do with communication and marketing on a contract basis for the last 10 years. So when I wanted to go full time and find a steady position, it just sort of coincided with QAG needing somebody to take over for the communications and marketing position. So win-win for QAG and me.
And how long have you been at QAG?
I think we're coming up on about 6 months. Yeah.
Oh, so you're fairly fresh-faced there.
For the most part, yeah. But like I said, I've known Chris for like 8 years. A lot of the people at the company are old hats as far as the indie community goes. So a lot of them have already met me or have met me at various points over the years.
That's good to hear. And right, so with that out of the way, so we actually have quite a few games to get through here. Remembering, well, it's like there's at least 4 here that we have to cover.
Yeah, we've launched 6 games in the last 4 months. We're launching another one tomorrow.
Right. I think when we had Chris on the show last, we were talking mainly about Round Guard.
Right.
So I guess we'll start with the Ambassador Fractured Timelines.
Go for it.
Well, in this, we did a review not too long ago, and Twilight, you reviewed that game, so I think I'll have you handle some of the questions here, since you're more familiar with it.
All right. I guess one question I might have is, do you know what might have inspired it?
As far as what inspired the Ambassador, the guys at Tiny Dino played a lot of Nuclear Throne. They played a lot of Gauntlet. A lot of classic twin stick action format went into the making of the Ambassador. But I know that the time stoppage feature was something that was completely unique, and then the weapons are partially inspired by the Breath of the Wild system of finding different weapons and equipping them for different situations. So there's a healthy blend of different game types and genres in there.
Let's see now. It's been a while since I actually played it. Don't really have much of in the way of questions to actually ask about it.
Fair enough. Well, I'll take over from here. Well, I suppose my first question is, how did QAG first stumble upon this particular title?
So Tiny Dino was exhibiting at DreamHack in Texas, and Chris, actually, our producer, he reaches out to a lot of different titles, a lot of different indie studios to see who's got cool projects cooking. And then once we played it, talked to Tiny Dino a little bit about what their expectations were. We made an offer for an agreement, and then we went from there.
Sounds pretty standard.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that QAG tries to do with every indie studio is provide them with a fair deal and get them on as many consoles as possible. It's sort of our signature.
Right. So it sounds like they developed one version and you helped out with the porting to other systems.
Yep. I think that the only platform that the Ambassador didn't end up on was PlayStation. But for everything else, the Switch, the Xbox versions, we negotiated with the console platform, so Microsoft and Nintendo, and then we handled all the marketing and stuff for it.
Well, were you involved with any of the actual porting development, or is that all the developer?
Well, I mean, Tiny Dino did all of the development. The porting process actually goes through, our team of engineers and Chris, our producer.
Right. Okay, so there was a bit of collaboration there.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, one of the things about publishing a game is that you have to make sure that it works, right? So
Of course.
QAG handled all of the quality assurance stuff. We had a dedicated person on that, making sure that the game was complete from release, and then we're still supporting it to this day with patches and updates, that kind of thing.
In regards to a PlayStation version, can you go into any detail of why that never transpired, or is it still something that's in negotiations?
I mean, I can't really make console announcements without talking to the teams or anybody at Tiny Dino yet. But I think that the idea was that if we have the opportunity to work with PlayStation and get it on the platform, we will. But the situation has to be right, and I don't necessarily know that that's a priority for us right now.
Anyway, I'm like, say, it's like just, always curious when a game. That does beg another question. I'm not sure that can be answered at this point in time, and that's in terms of next generation plans. Are any of your games currently or upcoming planning on hitting the Xbox Series X or the PlayStation?
Well, I mean, I can tell you that if you guys are looking forward to those announcements, we can probably start soon. But as of right now, we have nothing to talk about.
Fair enough.
I mean, I think it's safe to assume that anyone that's going to be talking about next gen is going to do it once the platforms are out, the consoles are out, people are able to have their hands on them.
Some are already announcing stuff right now, like not even necessarily like dedicated PlayStation 5 or Xbox Series X, kind of a backwards compatibility thing. The jig, like I said, it depends on the company. Anyway, pressing forward, we have Deleveled, which is a fairly interesting platforming game, like which we reviewed not too long ago. Like, not sure if you saw that.
Yeah, we've got it on our list.
For the uninitiated, what is Deleveled?
For the uninitiated, Deleveled is a puzzle platformer where you control two squares at once, and you have to manipulate gravity, levels themselves, and basically think with both sides of your brain.
Right. It's a fairly non-standard platformer, I suppose is a good way of putting it.
No jump button. It's movement left, right, up and down.
Yeah.
Well, depending on which switches you hit.
It's basically mirror puzzles the game, I think is a good way of putting it, because both squares. I'm not exactly sure if anything here is supposed to actually be a thing or if they're just supposed to be shapes. But they move in sync with each other, at least usually. Granted, a lot of the puzzles are shaped around, either keeping things in sync or out of sync, depending on the circumstance. And anyway, I suppose my question is, was it the premise here that first attracted you to Deleveled?
Well, I mean, one of the things about Deleveled that we focused on as a company was that it was a unique idea that we hadn't seen before. It started out as a game jam game like a lot of our games do, and we wanted to give it the opportunity to shine as a full release because it's a novel concept.
Mhm.
You mentioned that the key part of the game is making sure that your squares stay in sync, and the thing is you control both squares at once, so you are moving them in sync, but you have to rely on the level, the actual jumping, the bouncing, that kind of thing, in order to keep them in the same place. And a lot of the time the solutions that you find for some of the later levels, like, you can't keep the squares in the same place. You have to move them around in very specific ways in order to hit the switches. So
Right.
it's that complexity, it's that uniqueness that drew QAG to the title, um, as well as the fact that, when you look at where Deleveled started with the brutally simple, two squares, one or two lines, and then what it became with the fully reactive backgrounds, the chiptune soundtrack. We like letting the studios that we partner with really polish and grow their vision of their game. So if this had just stayed at a game jam level, then it would have been brutally simple. It would have come out at a lower price point. It would have been a smaller game, but because they worked with us, we were able to give them the breathing room and the development time in order to really make something fun.
Hmm. And what sort of puzzles would one encounter in this title?
I mean, it's a puzzle platformer. So a big part of the puzzle aspect is that you have to hit switches at the same time. You can only hit certain switches with certain squares. So your top square is always going to have to hit a switch above the line, and the bottom square has to switch, or has to hit the switches on the bottom part of the line. So your puzzles are gravity placement based, with a lot of the bouncing and the platforming taking the center stage as far as getting your squares where they need to go. But that's not everything. There are secret levels, so certain combinations of switches being hit, depending on the complexity of movement that you need to get to them, do unlock secret levels. And there's actually, I love this. There's an Easter egg in the game where if you hit the right set of switches in the right order, it will actually unlock the earliest version of the game, and you'll play like this goofy lo-fi, like borderline pen on paper version of the game.
I'm like, I've seen that a few times before, but that's always an interesting thing to include. Like, I'm not sure if that's like the actual game jam version of the game, or I mean, do you know if that like that particular version's in the released package here?
I mean, based on some of the stuff that I've seen in development, it is very reminiscent of the earliest version of it from the game jam.
Mhm.
But I think that there were some tweaks made so that it functioned more similarly to the final game.
Okay. Right. And as much as I'd like to ask more questions of this, we do have to move on. Like I said, this is just, it's kind of the, when you have a lot of games, you can't ask as many questions about them. It's just, once again, 4 or 5 games to cover here. And indeed, moving to the game that we're actually showing on stream right now, Breakpoint. Nothing to do with any Keanu Reeves movies. This is actually a melee-based twin-stick shooter, which, if nothing else, is a fairly unique take on the genre.
Well, there's no shooting.
Right.
So it's a twin stick slasher.
Right. It's just, genre names. Point is, you use 2 sticks to hit the enemies. And very reminiscent of the original Geometry Wars. Very minimalist, very how do I put this? Very pure in its presentation. Though I suppose my first question is, were you concerned about the particular usage of hammers, axes, swords, what have you, instead of your usual bullets in these things.
No, not at all. The gameplay loop in Breakpoint is actually very similar to Dark Souls. You learn the weapons, you learn what they do, you learn which ones are effective for which situations, and then you have to think tactically. Um, we've put out a few different twin stick games over the summer. Fun Time was a twin stick shooter, very hyper arcadey, very high score chasing. It was essentially Geometry Wars if Geometry Wars had a puzzle mode and a laser wrecking ball and a story mode. Um, so we're really familiar with the twin stick shooter archetype already. But Breakpoint actually slows a lot of the gameplay down so that you can feel those hits. The hammer means more when it makes an impact. The sword swings, they feel more meaty when you land hits. The spear driving your enemies off while also hitting them very precisely. The combat loop for us is one of the things that makes Breakpoint so special, is that it's brutally simple, light and heavy attacks, and you know the people that we have currently playing it and currently doing like all the high score runs in our Discord, they all tell us that they love it because they're big fans of twin stick games, but they're also fans of hack and slash stuff. So we feel like it's a pretty good marriage of the two.
I've enjoyed what I've played so far, although I do admit this is the kind of game that I would play. I play for about 15, 30 minutes, then play something else. Yeah.
Yeah.
But this wasn't the other defining feature of the game is, well, the actual breakpoint system. For the viewers, how does the system work?
So the the system, the progression that you have is tiered in two ways. So you have a limited number of hits per weapon before the weapon explodes, and then the second tier, which is the upgradability of those individual weapons. So the longer you play and the more XP, the more charge that you gather, um, the more damage each single weapon does, the better the heavy attack and the light attack get. Um, each weapon is upgradable 3 times, and throwing the weapon or hitting the break point where the weapon explodes creates a bigger explosion the more that you level the weapon up. A good example of this is say you're starting with the axe and you make it through the first 3 or 4 waves. You'll notice that the axe is at level 3. If you go after one single small enemy and you're down to your last swing, but it's a fully charged axe, you're essentially wasting the highest powered attack that you have on one single explosion for one single enemy. So thinking a little bit more tactically, waiting for the next wave to spawn, maybe even the next wave to spawn before you use that final swing on the fully upgraded axe, not only guarantees you the biggest explosion, but it also guarantees that you'll get all of your charge back so that you can then level all the way back up to 3 with the axe.
Right. So that's basically the risk reward system of the game.
Yeah, definitely.
And it's also tied to throwing the weapon. And I suppose the question that beckons here: what would be the advantage of tossing your weapon instead of waiting for a charge?
So when you cause an explosion, the game slows down. It's not necessarily bullet time, but the game slows down and it allows you to get a clearer picture of who's left after the explosion and where you want to move. While the explosion is happening and time is slowed, you can still move. Throwing the weapon gives you a little bit more space. So in scenarios like I just talked about, where you wait for 1 or 2 waves to load and you just sort of dodge and weave your way through the table, so to speak. If you get cornered, if you put enough distance between yourself and let's say 50 enemies, you can throw the weapon behind you. It'll hit and then it'll explode and continue going while also still widening that gap between you and the other enemies. So throwing the weapon is always a good quick exit strategy.
Okay. And in terms of the games itself, are there any plans to introduce any new modes, like say a time attack mode, or a wave mode, or a survival mode, or anything of that nature?
That is entirely up to Studio Estesia.
Mhm.
They are the guys that made the game. It's just two guys. I know that they've been exploring options and stuff like that because we do have discussions in our Discord about what other modes people would like to see and what people would like to do with the game. For right now, though, I think everybody's focused on just supporting the game, patching, making performance changes. I know that we just pushed a patch last week that actually helped a lot of the chugging in terms of frame rates on the larger explosions later in the game. We actually saw some of our feedback comes from the top 10 people on the leaderboard. And because they get in our Discord and they let us know, like, hey, I would have had an 8 million point run, but I lost, some frames as I had too many enemies on screen and this explosion went off. We can actually go back, look at the replay, see what happened, why it hitched, and what we can fix. So I think that's the focus right now, is making sure that everything's performing, to the best of its ability. And there's a possibility that there'll be more modes added later, but I again can't give you anything definite now.
So, is there another patch in development?
Currently, I don't think so. We are actually gearing up for another launch. So everyone is as far as development stuff goes, I believe Nick and Ed are working on it and are still checking to make sure that the game is running the way that it should be. It's not like it's going to break overnight. But no, as far as I'm aware, we don't have another patch scheduled for a while.
Okay. And before moving on, Petty, do you have any of your questions about Breakpoint, since you're the one playing the game?
Not really. It seems pretty interesting from what I've played so far.
Okay. Now moving on to the game that you're launching tomorrow, which is called Fracture, if I'm got this correct.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah, it's in all caps. 4L Games was very deliberate. They wanted us to know that it is in fact called Fracture. And it's really important to them that for artistic reasons it needs to be spelled in all caps.
Like the font?
No, I mean it doesn't. I mean the font doesn't really matter. I've been sending 200 to 300 emails over the last week where everyone's like, "Cool, I'd like to check out Fracture," and I'm like, "Do you mean Fractor?" And they're like, "Oh yeah, that'd be fun." And I'm like, "Okay, cool. Here's the code. Here's the key."
It's the name of a font,
I
I think.
Yeah, I mean, Fracture the game is, I think, something LucasArts published like about 10 years ago or something.
Oh, Fractor is the font with a K.
Oh, okay. This does have a C.
Yeah, Fractor is Fracter, the game.
Oh, okay. Yep, gotcha.
Yeah.
That's different. Sorry, the way you were saying it so dramatically, I assumed it was the German word.
No, that's okay. Yeah, Fractor's a pretty interesting game.
Like according to the marketing materials here, it is a emotive isometric puzzle adventure game set in the mysterious labyrinth of a glowing black architecture. Like,
That's one way
which
to put that.
is certainly an aesthetic.
Yeah.
Like,
so Fractor originally released for mobile platforms a few years ago, and it was recently brought to Steam. 4L Games has partnered with us at QAG to bring the game to Switch. That's the release that's actually happening tomorrow. So it's a little bit of a polish on the existing game. People who've played it on Steam will be pretty familiar with the visuals being a little bit more rich than they are in the mobile game. But Fractor is a puzzle adventure game. again with no jump button. I'm not sure why that's becoming a theme for us, but yeah, you play a young hero trying to find themselves in the darkness of a labyrinth. Um, your only tool to escape or get out is light, and very fittingly, light is your weapon. It is your detail in the game. It's also the thing that's supposed to keep you moving forward.
Like, certainly looks interesting. If nothing else, like, um,
I coined the term a few weeks ago, the black and light art style, because technically anything that you see lit up is light in the game. It's not just white.
right.
Mhm.
I mean, some screenshots, it reminds me of QAG's own The Bridge, because that had a, I won't say similar aesthetic, but similar color scheme.
Yeah, the bridge is the bridge is meant to look very like hand drawn, sketched, black and white in the back of somebody's notebook, perhaps.
Yeah.
Uh, I'd say Fracture has more like soft and hard shapes, not a lot of line art.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. And has anything else been upgraded from like the previous versions? Like, are there any Switch specific features like touchscreen support or HD Rumble?
Um, I don't. I mean, I know controller support was with the Switch was one of our main priorities. Um, but QAG doesn't necessarily believe in making any of our games better on one platform over another. The entire philosophy is that if you want to play a game that we make, you should be able to play it on the system that you have. Uh, so for Fractor, because they specifically wanted us to work on it and put it out on Switch, it is on Switch. Uh, People have played it on mobile, obviously, and then it's also available on Steam. But for the Switch version, we didn't really want to change too much of the original vision, or do anything too different, because it just doesn't make sense to us to try and tell our audience or the gaming community at large that this system is better than this system for this game. It makes way more sense for us to just say, like, look, if you really like the game and you really want to play it, it's on this system that you probably have.
I see, I get the philosophy. Um, and how much is Fracture going to be when it releases? Is it going to be in line with, say, the Steam version?
So Fractor is releasing for $6.99 on the Nintendo eShop. But we are doing a 20% off launch discount for the next week. So people can pick it up for even less than that.
Neat. And let me see here. And you've also got a number of games coming. I hesitate to use the word soon, but certainly in the like Sail Forth and
Yeah.
Saturnalia.
Saturnalia.
Like, I suppose, like, what is the next game that you are working on after the one that is releasing tomorrow?
So Fractor is going to be the last game in the sprint of games that we've put out this summer leading into the end of the year.
Mhm.
For release dates and release periods, can't really talk about what's coming out next. But stay tuned, because we have a lot of announcements pertaining to Sailforth and Saturnalia. We also have Freshly Frosted, Kerr, which is one of my personal favorites. And then, maybe some stuff that you guys haven't even heard of yet.
Yeah. There's also a game called Space Otter Charlie in your list.
Yep.
But yeah. I mean, we've certainly enjoyed what you've put out this year, like, and yeah. Well, as always, when you have more to talk about, we'll certainly endeavor to have you back on the program.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
if not you, Chris, or someone else from QAG.
It'll probably end up being me or Chris.
Right.
Yeah.
But anyway, so like the games are Fracture and Breakpoint. Fracture is coming out to the Switch eShop tomorrow for, was it $6.99 or $7.99?
$6.99, yeah.
$6.99. And Breakpoint is available on Steam for $5, $4.99. Be sure to pick them up today. So Betty, play us to the next segment. All right, welcome to the topic of discussion. So this week we are talking about Sega's 60th anniversary. Because like I'm not sure if like the actual anniversary date has actually hit, but Sega's doing a anniversary celebration that's spawning from, well, like last week up until December. Indeed, like this past weekend, they had a big Steam sale blowout, up to and including introducing a whole bunch of free games. Granted, games being maybe a relative term in some of their cases, like the Golden Axe prototype, which has since become gorged in controversy. It's like I'm going to assume that the listeners to our show have heard about what went on, but if you missed, in brief, turns out the Golden Axe prototype wasn't something that was just whipped up for this event.
Well, they
Unlike,
did say it wasn't, but
well, like the other three games seem very specifically generated for this past event.
no, I'm just saying it's not a secret
Yeah,
because
remember,
they put that in the description. But yeah, it turns out they didn't actually ask all of the people that like worked on it or give them any credit. They were probably just asking like the person who was in charge of it, at least initially.
Well, it's like it's more what the marketing department did more than anything else. Well, not just throwing this out in the blue, but they did it in a very Adult Swimmy way. That is to say, the tone was very mocking, or at least somewhat irreverent, to the point where the actual people who actually worked on the game complained about it quite voraciously. Vociferously, yes, that one. Point is, they had a problem because it turns out this game prototype was generated in about 2 weeks under crunch circumstances. Like I said, there's a whole Twitter thread. Like it's fairly known news at this point. Hell, there was a Jimquisition episode about it. So I don't really feel the need that we have to recap the entire saga here. It's just, this is more shit that goes on in the video game industry, and reminder that it's also not a new thing, because this thing was built around 2013, 2012 maybe. No, it's 2013. It was like right before Sega Studios Australia got shut down. That nastiness aside, Sega's been rolling out the red carpet for its releases. Like there was a whole bunch of stuff on sale this past weekend. Also worth noting, they were giving away Sonic the Hedgehog 2 for free on Steam, which is nice, I guess. I know it's kind of hard to get excited about Sonic the Hedgehog 2 because it's Sonic the Hedgehog 2. It's a great game, sure, but it's kind of overexposed.
Also, if you don't have it by now, what's wrong with you?
Does anyone else understand what I'm talking about here?
You probably already have Sonic 2.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you're
like
interested
that.
in it at all.
Exactly.
Right. It's I mean, I suppose it's better than giving out Sonic 3D Blast, even though you probably there's a less of a chance that you have that game. That's just a quality thing. Like, sorry, I've never liked Sonic 3D Blast.
Meanwhile, looking over at my Genesis collection.
I mean, I have the game. I have the entire Steam Genesis collection. It's just I've never particularly cared for that game. I like it better than, say, Sonic Spinball. Like, I've always hated Sonic Spinball. But more to the point, Sega is still giving away a free game right now. And that is the Steam version of Nights into Dreams. What you got to do is you have to sign up to their newsletter to get it.
We'll go through that later.
If you feel that's worth doing, go right ahead. I will say the Steam port isn't the best, mainly because it seems to be lacking fucking controller support, and you will need controller support for fucking Nights.
Mm-hmm.
Mouse and keyboard is. I'm sure mouse and keyboard is fine.
Oh, you wish it was mouse and keyboard. It's fucking keyboard only.
Yeah.
Poor fool.
Yes, the keyboard. That device that is well known for its ability to process analog input well.
Three-dimensional analog input.
Well, that's only when you're playing as the kids. It is it is mostly a 2D game, actually. When you are playing as Knights, or can you play as Rihala in the? I think you can.
I think if you play on Halloween, you can play as them.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember if that is like Nights or Christmas Nights.
Yeah, Nights was one of those ones for those who didn't know. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. And Sega still has a few things on sale, like Yakuza Kiwami 2 is 50% off. Persona 4 Golden is 30% off. It is a bit weird that that's included in the collection, but well, the Sega of today has a lot more under its belt than the Sega of yesteryear. Different things, because Sega has had a number of face changes over the years, and that's kind of to be expected for a thing that's existed for 60 years. And in terms of the origins of Sega, they did not start out in video games. They were video game adjacent, or as close as you could be, in the 50s. So as a brief history of Sega, very brief, because seriously, we could spend multiple episodes just talking about a period of Sega.
I think we've done some of those.
I think we could spend an entire college course discussing the history at Sega at this point.
Well, yeah, that's 60 years of being one of the big players in the industry.
Mm-hmm.
But when they started out, they were a company that imported amusement devices from America, and Sega's actually got a lot of Western blood in its DNA, because it was founded by Americans. It was a Japanese company. we're talking like the post World War II occupation of Japan. So that's why that happened. In fact, Sega is directly related to that because these devices were imported for Americans. Servicemen, and I'm talking things like pinballs, jukeboxes, and other amusement devices of the age. And we're talking about the 50s and such here, which predates even arcade games. It's like Sega wouldn't get into arcade games until I want to say this. I'm trying to think if they got into the whole shooting gallery craze that permeated Japan in the 60s, which is like the first thing, and which is like the first game Nintendo ever developed. The original version of Wild Gunman.
One might say
But
the
that's
physical version of Wild Gunman.
yeah. Excuse me. Yeah, Sega, not surprisingly, started out as a maven of the arcades. And, they were not probably weren't the first, but certainly one of the earlier adopters of the, of the arcades. Once again, like they were already in the arcades by, virtue of handing out coin ops, slot machines and the like. It wasn't that hard. It wasn't that much of a jump from there to actual what we would define as arcade game. Let's see, and they got here we go. They got started with the submarine simulator Periscope, which is a thing from the late 1960s. And it's kind of like what it says. It's simulating a submarine. Like, also
down
interesting
and all that jazz.
Yeah, like, and also for a time, Sega was owned by, sort of Paramount. That is to say, American conglomerate Gulf and Western Industries, which was the parent company of Paramount at the time, picked up Sega for whatever reason in 1969. And it existed that way until the year of 1984, when one of the more significant events, believe it or not, in Sega's history happened. This is when Sega gets purchased by the original management and by a company called CSK. CSK is probably more well known as the creators of the CRI middleware, what you might have seen on the front of a lot of games starting from the Dreamcast onward. And there's a lot of history here. Just trying to encapsulate it all. We go from arcade manufacture to the various systems that Sega has released, starting with the SG 1000, which eventually would get to the Sega Mark III, which is the Master System. I believe we've talked about it, if not all of these systems, and certainly many of them, in their own individual packages. And it goes from Master System to Genesis. We're hitting the parts of that most people know.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like if people are aware of the Sega of old, it's Genesis stuff, which kind of makes sense because The Genesis was arguably their height as a company. Like, granted, that perhaps would depend on where you were. We all know that the Genesis gave Nintendo a run for its money in the early '90s. Even edging it out for a couple of years. Though I think ultimately the Super NES, Nintendo won that. It's just it didn't really matter in the end because, well, Sony moved in and then took over the industry. And a lot of that had to do with Sega shitting the bed a lot.
Do we even need to go into the Saturn?
Like,
I mean, the Saturn is like 1/3 of the stuff that they did wrong.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
well, and 2/3 of that was fucking Saturn Day. I mean, Saturn Day is perhaps, if not the most consequential day in video game history, certainly one of them.
Mhm.
Now,
If you want to announce your
Because-
console
oh, heck yeah.
if you want to announce your console for an early surprise release, make sure you tell the stores.
and the other developers, because it turns out having a 6-month lead against your competition doesn't really matter when they are in a more solid position to launch, both monetarily and they have actual games that you can buy and you will play. This is the shit that killed the Saturn out the gates, like literally. It wasn't just a paltry amount of Saturn releases at launch. It's like the versions of Virtua Fighter and Daytona USA were so subpar that they had to do re-releases of that. Virtua Fighter Remix and Daytona USA, like CCE, if I'm remembering correctly. Like, that's not a good start. Like, when you have to have a mulligan on your arguable flagship games. Granted, not the only games that were there at the Saturn launch. It's just in terms of marquee names, Virtua Fighter and Daytona USA were certainly far and away those, because the other stuff that was launching at that particular moment in time were new franchises like Clockwork Knight, Bug, and Panzer Dragoon. I think Panzer Dragoon was the launch game. Like, now, obviously, out of those, only Panzer Dragoon managed to be a thing. Granted, Bug and Clockwork Knight got sequels on the Saturn, but nobody's really been clamoring for re-releases of those, if they remember that these things happened at all. Like, and just keep in mind that the Saturn was not the first fuck up that Sega had done in recent memory. No. Like the 32X killing all of their systems, and even though that they were still doing well, it's like the idea is you transition people from one system to another. Like, just a lot of shit that went down.
Yeah, North America and Japan not getting along.
Right. And a lot of that had to do with the fact that the Genesis didn't do shit in Japan. Like, Sega was never Nintendo's rival there. That award went to NEC and their PC Engine. That was the thing that gave the NES or the Famicom a run for its money. I mean, I think in terms of sales, the best-selling system in Japan was maybe the Saturn. I know the Saturn did best in Japan by quite a margin. And, I actually had the virtue of living until the fucking Dreamcast. Yeah, this was kind of another sign that Sega was, kind of circling the drain in a WCW-ish fashion. It's like, their fucking presidents flat out states the Saturn isn't our future, and, basically axes the system in a good year and a half before their next system launches. This particular this particular shit-headed move doesn't get enough flack that it should, because I must once again stress, it's, okay, granted, Sega had games getting released because at the time Sega was in a pretty unique position, because Sega was the only company that did a console, did arcades, and did PC releases as well.
Mhm.
In fact, Sega has been doing PC releases since about the mid '80s. In fact, thinking that they've actually been a games publisher like before they started releasing systems here. Like, they released Atari 2600 games. Oddly enough, not their own. I think that's because of licensing. Because it's also worth noting, different divisions have different contracts. Like, for example, a lot of Sega's arcade games came to other systems, TG16, Famicom, what have you. But once again, those were arcade games. Those were things that were licensed out by the arcade division, which had a separate contract system than the console division. Because, guess what? Sega wasn't really in the mood to loan out Sonic the Hedgehog, when they were actually making consoles. At least, when they could help it, because I will say that did happen before the Dreamcast died. Once again, like, Sega, in an effort to avert being dead, struck up a deal where their games would appear on the, of all things, Neo Geo Pocket Color.
Oh God, no! You're making me relive that again.
The Sonic game on the Neo Geo Pocket Color is perfectly fine. Like, maybe it's a bit remixy for its own good, but it's fine. Like, like, honestly, Sonic's handheld endeavors, were always fine for the most part. I mean, maybe not Sonic Advance 3, but, and that's kind of, it's kind of stunning that for as popular as the Sonic Advance series and Sonic Rush have been, there's not that much called to have them ported and updated. Like, honestly, I would like to see that. I would like to see that above another fucking version of Sonic the Hedgehog 2. Look, and it's a fine game. Arguably the top Sonic game. Like, arguable, because I will argue in favor of Sonic 3 and Knuckles.
Indeed.
Personally. But I know, like, there's some weird rights issues going on with Sonic 3 and Knuckles, apparently. Maybe something to do with the music.
Yeah.
Like, Sonic 3 and Knuckles stopped getting the re-releases. Though you can still get it on Steam. So I really don't know what's going on with this, but, just another fucking version of Sonic 1 or 2. It's been done.
I hereby curse Adam to receive a version of Sonic 2 that only lets you play as Knuckles.
I'm like, that would be more interesting. Or fuck, if you're gonna do Sonic 2 again, get the fucking one get the Christian Whitehead version. Get that off a fucking mobile device.
Please, I beg you.
Yes. The definitive version of Sonic 2 is, for whatever reason, still stuck on the fucking mobile devices.
I don't even think you can get on modern mobile devices now.
It's hard to say, but like, I mean, they got Sonic CD off the fucking mobile devices, and I'm sure they could do Sonic 2. That version, because that version isn't just like a re-release. It's basically the director's cut / fan mix. It's weird. Also, that version of Sonic 2 directly led to Sonic Mania, so there's another reason.
More of that, please.
Yeah. I mean, and that kind of leads into, like, Sega's kind of muddled classic efforts, because they have like 3 of them going on, at least, or at least they did, because they had like Sega Forever for the mobile. Like it's Sega Forever for the mobile. Sega Ages for the Switch. Porting the Genesis collection from Steam to other platforms. Like Sega Ages was interesting because it was an attempt to expand beyond the usual Sega fare to a point. Once again, you still had Sonic 1 and 2, and Sega basically said, yeah, these are here because, well, Sonic pays the bills.
Yeah.
Even classic Sonic. But, Sega Ages was also doing things like Virtua Racing, Columns 2, fucking, I think, like one of the Puyo Puyo games is in there. Thunder Force 4 and 3, games that we hadn't actually seen in a good long while, including some promise stuff. Like Sega promised to release some of the Technosoft materials that they acquired. They finally did that. Unfortunately, the downside with going with the seldom seen or the extremely niche is they tend to sell a lot less. Because as far as I understand it, the Sega Ages line is no more. Which is unfortunate. See, that's kind of the other thing that's kind of stymieing other areas of Sega's lineage. It's like, they've got a lot of great shit on the Dreamcast, or they put out for the Dreamcast, or like the Saturn. A lot of stuff on the Saturn is still stuck on the Saturn. The problem is people aren't really familiar with those eras. Sega keeps releasing the Genesis stuff for the same reason that Atari keeps going to back to the 2600. Well, unfortunately, this was the period of time when people were familiar with those particular games. Also, Sega can, port and update those pretty easily in comparison to Dreamcast or, God help us, Saturn games. They're still not really a good Saturn emulation solution because the system was so goddamn weird.
Weird is an understatement, my friend.
Yeah. I mean, pain in the ass is probably more accurate. But still, I would like to see stuff like Burning Rangers, or fucking Panzer Dragoon Saga. It's like I would like to be able to actually play Panzer Dragoon Saga without, having to go several $1,000s in debt at this point, because like a lot of the late stage Saturn games are really fucking expensive. At least their North American versions are, because they didn't get very many runs. Like I would like to see a fully all of Shining Force 3 release. Or fuck, to get Shining Force 3 at all re-released. And as far as I'm concerned, that was the end of Shining Force. Those fucking PlayStation things do not count. Like I said, I could literally rant for hours about Sega. But we don't have that much time. At least
I liked the Genesis.
Yeah. As far as Sega today, well, they're a lot more Western focused. Having acquired companies like the Creative Assembly, purveyors of the Total War series, Sports Interactive, which puts out the Football Manager titles, Amplitude Studios, and the Endless Dungeon series and Endless Space series, 2 Point Studios, 2 Point Hospital, and Relic Entertainment, which Company of Heroes. Although interestingly enough, Relic Entertainment is not working on a Sega project right now. They're currently knee deep in development of the next Age of Empires title. they are doing that because they are renowned as an RTS specialist, and there's not many of those left in the world because there's not a lot of RTSs coming out these days, which still saddens me to no end. Because honestly, I prefer real-time strategy to turn-based strategy games. Like, but that's neither here nor there. And of course, like back in 2013, I think they purchased Atlas, and they are the owners of Atlas. It turns out that worked out pretty well for them. Although it is worth noting that Atlas is a fucking trash fire of a company, and they need to stop being so goddamn homophobic and transphobic. Till then, fuck you, Atlas. They keep getting worse with every fucking release.
I think they have a few specific people that are pushing some parts.
Mhm.
But yes.
But it keeps getting worse. Like somehow they keep going down further and further down. You know, like fucking Catherine Full Body found a new introduced trans erasure. Joy. Seriously, fuck this team and fuck every game that comes out and correct this shit. Anyway, so that is maybe a bit jumbled history of Sega and reflection on their 60th anniversary. Like I said, this isn't really a formal retelling of their fucking history because that would take a lot of hours.
Mm-hmm.
Once again, 60 years of history, and it's 60 years of more history than the Genesis.
Mm-hmm.
Though, as far as what the future holds, I'm pretty sure it does not hold making any actual new console. Like, Sega is not getting back into that game ever. Also worth noting, Sega does make more than just games, which is not unusual for Japanese conglomerates, but that's kind of beyond the scope of our topics because we don't really talk about beyond the games here. Anyway, so that'll about do it for this installment of Fragments of Silicon. Once again, Friday show, no Sunday show because dealing with a whole bunch of family that day. But on the Monday reviews, remember, people, Monday, we'll be reviewing, the game we just showcased here, Breakpoint, Radio Squid for the PlayStation 4, Neighbors Back from Hell for the Nintendo Switch, and Dead Exit, which is falling under Twilight Winter's purview. So, until, really a few minutes from now, about 15 minutes from now, because we are planning to have another episode of Last News Desk on the Left. Whether or not it launches, it's up to Mac. Like, we are assuming that he is going to show up. He's been pretty good about that so far, but we are only a few weeks into this endeavor. So, so until next time, I shall wish you good games.